Good afternoon. Thank you guys for being patient with us. I brought a special guest, so I figured you might be okay if we were a little bit delayed today. As you all know, the President hosted a very productive cabinet meeting this morning and made some news by announcing that the United States has again designated North Korea a state sponsor of terrorism. As the President said, one of the primary goals of his recent Asia trip was to pursue the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. This designation will impose increased sanctions and penalties on North Korea that will continue our progress toward that goal. Additionally, it is a reminder that North Korea has repeatedly supported acts of international terrorism, including assassinations on foreign soil. The President's position is this: the North Korean regime must be lawful. It must end its unlawful nuclear and ballistic missile development and cease all support for international terrorism. This afternoon, we have Secretary of State Rex Tillerson with us to answer some of your questions on this topic. He's going to come up and make a couple of remarks and then take questions on that topic. And as always, I will be back after that to answer other news of the day. With that, Mr. Secretary.
Thanks, Sarah. And as Sarah indicated, the President did make the designation earlier today, announced it in the cabinet meeting. And I think it's really just the latest step in a series of, as you can see, ongoing steps to increase the pressure. I call it the peaceful pressure campaign. The President calls it the maximum pressure campaign, so there's no confusion. They're one and the same. And I think this is, though, to hold North Korea accountable for a number of actions that they've taken over the last several months, the last year or so. Some of you will know that North Korea was designated as a state sponsor of terrorism back in 1988. So they have been designated before. That designation was lifted in 2008 as part of an effort to negotiate with North Korea an end to their nuclear program. That obviously failed because we can see where we are today. But as a result of actions they've taken, including assassinations outside of their country, using banned chemical weapons, these are all very, very serious actions on their part that put the public at risk as well. So that, along with a number of other actions that they've taken, resulted in their designation now again as a state sponsor of terrorism. I think, as Sarah indicated, the practical effect of it is we already have many of these actions in place through the current sanctions. It may, though, disrupt and dissuade some third parties from undertaking certain activities with North Korea, as it does impose prohibition on a number of other activities that might not be covered by existing sanctions. But I think importantly, this is just continuing to point out North Korea's illicit, unlawful behaviors internationally, and we felt it necessary to reimpose the designation for that reason. So with that, happy to take questions, and I'm going to let Sarah referee because I'm no good at refereeing.
So good at it.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Mark, yes. Is this move an intent to incentivize Kim Jong-un towards negotiations? I think it's been more than 60 days since we've seen some kind of test. Do you think that timetable is in any way promising? And why wait until we were back in the U.S.? The President said that there was hope for diplomacy when we were in Asia, and this seems to be counter that.
No, we still hope for diplomacy, and the timing of this is just one of us concluding the process. There is a very specific designation process that we have to go through at the State Department to be able to meet the criteria to make such a designation, and we wanted to ensure we had fully met all those requirements. Again, this is all part of just continuing to turn this pressure up, and we continue to turn the pressure up on North Korea by getting other countries to join and take actions on their own. We've had other countries in our visit to Vietnam. They have committed that they're going to curtail activities further with North Korea. Malaysia has indicated a curtailment. Singapore has cut off all trade with North Korea. The Philippines have cut off all trade. And just recently, the Deputy Secretary of State's been in Africa. He had meetings with the Sudanese government. The Sudanese government have traditionally been buying military weapons from North Korea. They now have agreed to halt all those purchases as well. So this is it's taking effect all around the world, and we think as it takes effect, again, this just continues to tighten the pressure on the Kim regime, all with an intention to have him understand this is only going to get worse until you're ready to come and talk.
specific to the 60-day window, he hasn't tested in some time. You don't think
We're
this will
hope-
trigger?
We're hopeful that he continues this quiet period. That's our objective, is that he continue to be quiet as well. This designation, as I said, is one that we're required to undertake from time to time, and we've been monitoring the situation. We wanted to be sure we had sufficient evidence before making the designation. So this is a process that started actually several months ago.
Secretary Tillerson,
Thank you, Secretary. You mentioned that you're intending to increase regional pressure against the North Korean regime. Do you have any indication that that is working? And if you haven't seen those indications just yet, how long before do you go down this path before the administration has to begin changing strategies?
Well, we get a lot of anecdotal information that it is working, and then we do have our own, intelligence sources as well. And then what the Chinese and others share with us, that I think the general belief is it is having a significant effect on North Korea. We know that there are current shortages of fuel based upon what we can gather from anecdotally, but also from certain intel sources. We know that that their revenues are down because a number of the revenue streams are being curtailed now. So I think it is having an effect. Is this the reason we haven't had a provocative act in 60 days? I don't want to suggest to you that I could say, but we're hopeful this period will continue. And again, I think the president in his address in Seoul, South Korea to the General Assembly, I thought he laid out the case very well to them, that he wanted them to come have talks because he wants to deliver a different future to the people of North Korea.
Olivia?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I have a couple for you. The first is, can you give us an example of a third-party transaction that is now covered, that was not covered by either existing American sanctions or the UN Security Council sanctions?
Well, there could be certain dual-use equipment that may not have been covered under previous sanctions that this would prohibit now a third party selling that dual use. And so, and again, I don't want to suggest to you that the designation is suddenly going to put a whole new layer of sanctions on them, because again, I think we already have North Korea so heavily sanctioned in so many ways with the UN resolutions that have been undertaken. But this will close a few additional loopholes off.
You and the president both referred to assassinations, plural. We obviously all know about the Kim Jong-nam assassination at the airport. Can you give us another example of another assassination on foreign soil?
I don't have anything that I can share with you specifically.
Secretary.
Thanks. There seems to be more unilateral U.S. sanctions against North Korea on the way. The Treasury's going to announce something tomorrow. Have you given up on getting China to agree to an oil embargo?
We've not given up, and let me say this with China, we continue to talk with them, first to ensure that they are fully committed to implementing all the UN sanctions, and they have assured us they are, which, as you'll recall, the last round of sanctions imposed a pretty severe restriction on the import of finished products, so fuels, petroleum, diesel, jet fuel, and whatnot. But we have suggested to them, look, you control that oil pipeline that feeds their refinery. You can do that unilaterally on your own if you want to increase that pressure. Whether they're doing that or not, we don't know, and it's very difficult for us to know whether they're taking actions to curtail oil supplies to them.
Secretary, earlier today, President Trump said that the Treasury Department is going to be announcing additional sanctions tomorrow. He described it as a very large one, the highest level of sanctions. Can you give us any insight into what those additional sanctions may be?
Well, I'd like to leave it to Treasury to announce those tomorrow. They're similar to sanctions we've taken in the past. We're just going out much more broadly now to more entities. But I'd like to leave it to their announcement tomorrow and not jump the gun on them.
And do you all see today's announcement as more symbolic or as something that really does have a lot of teeth to it?
Well, I think it is very symbolic on the one hand, because it just points out again what a rogue regime this is and how brutal this regime is and how little they care for the value of human life. So I think if in that in of itself, I think makes a strong statement of just the nature of this regime. And as I've said, the practical effects may be limited, but hopefully we're closing off a few loopholes with this.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Maura Eliason from NPR. If China does not agree to cut off oil shipments to North Korea, how can you possibly get enough pressure on them to come
Well, their fuel supplies are already quite constrained, and as I said, we have evidence that there are fuel shortages in North Korea. Obviously, the civilians are by and large the ones that can't get fuel, so we see long lines of vehicles at petrol stations. We see certain petrol stations that appear to be out of fuel because they're closed when normally they'd be open. So there are indications that fuel supplies are already quite tight. As you know, they only refined a small amount of their fuel needs internally. They only have one refinery that operates, and it operates at a low capacity. So they were heavily dependent on imports of finished fuel products, which have been constrained significantly with the UN sanctions.
But is the Chinese action essential? In other words, do you need China to cut off those oil shipments to?
I don't know that the cutting off of oil is the magic wand or the silver bullet that is going to bring them to the table. What I would say is that the North Koreans have demonstrated in the past they have an enormous capacity to withstand a lot. They'll make their people pay, but they have an enormous capacity to withstand a lot. So I don't want to suggest that we think that one action is all it would take to get them to the table.
Margaret. Thank you. Margaret Talbot with Bloomberg. Thanks for welcome in our briefing room many times. I want to pick up on Olivia's question about the assassinations. How determinative was that in the specific evidence that you used to make this determination? And I also want to ask you, I think you and Ambassador Haley both spent some time with the president, and that's unusual. I know she was in town today. Can you tell us a little bit about that meeting and any substance that came up there?
Well, on the assassinations, the assassination in Malaysia was a significant event that caused us to really begin to look carefully at what else they might have been doing. As you know, that assassination involved the use of a chemical agent, a very dangerous agent, in a public place, and so that really got our attention. One of the things that we wanted to ensure is that we had a sufficient certainty around their role in that particular assassination, and so we've been working with Malaysian authorities as well and been in conversation with them. Wanted to let them have their own process obviously play out as well. With respect to Ambassador Haley and I, we were just both in the cabinet meeting today.
Was the threats, I know without getting too much into it, that there had been a suggestion from the North Korean media about some violence directed toward the U.S. president. Was that a determinative factor at all in the decision to make a designation?
No.
Mr. Secretary, Peter Baker, New York Times. Thank you for coming. You talked about assassination on foreign soil using a chemical agent. Russia has been accused of assassination on foreign soil, including using polonium in London. Should they be considered for the same sort of designation?
I think we have to consider every country that would take a substance like that and use it illegally.
Is there a process like that going on right now with Russia?
I don't want to comment on that.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Trey Yanks with One American News. Two quick questions for you. How do you balance the impact of sanctions? You talked about the people of North Korea paying the price. Is this something you're considering when you talk about more sanctions towards the regime of Kim Jong-un?
Well, it's always a difficult choice you make when you impose sanctions in terms of who's really going to bear the burden here. The truth of the matter is the people of North Korea already live under enormously difficult conditions. And I think what we're focused on is a mission that's going to change North Korea's trajectory, change their path. That's the best way we can help the North Korean people in the future, is to have Kim Jong-un reverse his nuclear weapons program, allow us and the rest of the world to then engage with them in economic activity that will ultimately provide a better life for his people.
And my follow-up question, do you believe that the United States is running out of diplomatic options to respond to the nuclear threat of North Korea?
No, I do not.
We got time for one last question. John Gizzy in the back.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. You talked about the limited intelligence on North Korea and on the regime. Is there any evidence of any dissent within Pyongyang at all, or possibly reaction against the current government by other members of the Kim family even, or other opponents to him?
Well, I want to be a little careful about how I answer that. What I would comment on is you're well aware of a number of executions that have occurred within his inner circle and within many of the military people that are close to him. So I'll leave it to your own interpretation. Thank you.
Hold on, we'll get to some more questions. I know that there is obviously a lot of interest today. Thank you again to Secretary of State for coming in and answering questions. As many of you, to shift gears just a little bit on some happier notes, I'm sure a lot of you have started to notice that the Christmas season has officially arrived here at the White House. This afternoon, the First Lady and Barron Trump will receive a beautiful 19-foot Christmas tree, which will serve as the official Christmas tree on display in the Blue Room. The tree will arrive via horse-drawn wagon and will be presented by Jim and Diane Chapman and their son David of Silent Night Evergreens in Wisconsin. The Chapmans were grand champion winners of the 2017 National Christmas Tree Contest, sponsored by the National Christmas Tree Association. The NCTA has presented the official White House Christmas tree since 1966. The grand champion grower wins the privilege of presenting a tree to the White House, and we're excited to have them here today for the 52nd time. As you probably also know, we've got some other holidays like Thanksgiving coming up, and this will be our last press briefing before the Thanksgiving holiday in this room. So I want to share a few things that I'm thankful for, and I think it would be nice for you guys to do so as well before asking your questions. Obviously, you probably know, and it's no secret, that I'm clearly very thankful for all of you here in the room. And I think that goes without saying. But in all seriousness, I'm very thankful for my family, my faith, particularly thankful for the brave men and women of the military, many of whom are away from their families during the holidays, protecting the freedoms that all of us in this room and across this country enjoy. I'm thankful for the police, the firemen, and first responders who keep us safe here at home, and I'm certainly thankful for the incredible privilege of serving this president and the American people. So this is how it's going to work today, since I'm here and I get to call on you. If you want to ask a question, I think it's only fair, since I've shared what I'm thankful for, that you start off with what you're thankful for. So anybody want to be first on what they're thankful for?
I'll give it a whirl.
April, you've been so eager, so I'm going to go with you to start us off on what you're most thankful for.
I'm thankful for life. I'm thankful for my children. I'm thankful for 20 years in this job. I'm thankful to be able to talk to you and question you every single day.
I feel the gratefulness there.
Now my question.
Yes, ma'am.
I hope you felt the passion of my thankfulness. So, the question is, since I didn't get a chance to ask Secretary Tillerson, there's a black hole when it comes to intelligence when it involves North Korea. And he was talking about, he said, Secretary Tillerson said, things will get worse until they're ready to talk. With that said, the rhetoric is still amping up. What is the concern about the intelligence that we don't know about? What do we know as relates to the nuclear capability of North Korea, and what are the concerns about the things that we don't know?
I mean, obviously the biggest concern is making sure that we take steps every single day to protect Americans. That's what the action of the president that he's taken today and that the Treasury Department will take tomorrow is, again, putting that maximum pressure on North Korea to put a very large focus on denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula. That's been the top priority, and that's going to continue to be our priority. We don't feel that they're fully there yet, and we want to keep pushing to make sure that we're taking steps to prevent them from getting any further into this process. I can't go really deep into specifics on information like that, but certainly, again, the priority of the administration is to protect Americans and partner with our allies and our friends around the globe to do that. And I think that's what you're seeing in some of the actions that took place today and that you'll see again tomorrow.
And lastly, on this Twitter, this back and forth Twitter with the
Sorry,
president.
April, I'm going to keep moving.
I understand, but this is a hot story, but does the president regret?
And I'm sure that one of your colleagues will happily ask. Francesca,
does the
go
president
ahead.
regret this tweet? I mean, he came back twice yesterday.
April, I'm starting to regret calling on you first.
But
Go
you
ahead,
were
Francesca.
still thankful for all of us. I'm part of the group. I
am, but I don't want that to go away, so I'm going to move on to one of your colleagues. Francesca, go ahead.
Well, I'm very thankful for you calling on me regularly as well. But I will follow your lead and be thankful for our service members. My brother's a service member, and our police. My dad is a police officer, so I'm very thankful for their service. But I want to ask today about something that Kellyanne Conway said this morning on Fox and Friends about the Alabama Senate race. She brought up tax reform and tax cuts and said that the Democrat running in that race would not be a vote for tax cuts. And she did not directly endorse the Republican that's running, Roy Moore. However, it opened the door, I think, to a question that we haven't really discussed in here yet, which is whether the president would be supportive of a write-in campaign of someone like Luther Strange, who he supported in the primary, or Jeff Sessions, his attorney general. Both of those are going around.
I think we have addressed this. I've addressed it quite a few times, but the president feels that it's up to the people of Alabama to make that determination who their next senator will be. I've answered a number of questions on this topic, and our position hasn't changed over the weekend. It's certainly still the same as it was when I answered those questions on Thursday and on Friday.
You asked that you said whether the president would support a write-in campaign.
We said
for
we
Jeff
support
Sessions.
the people of Alabama making the decision on who their next senator should be. John Decker.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. I'm thankful for my health, my family, my faith. I think I live in the best country on the face of the earth.
Isn't this nice? I feel like it's
And
making everybody happy.
I'm thankful, of course, that you address us every day here in the briefing room. My question's also about the Senate race in Alabama. This is an unusual question because normally we wouldn't ask you a question about the Republican nominee running for statewide office and whether or not the president is supportive of the Republican nominee. But my question is just that. Would you be pleased if Roy Moore wins his Senate race in Alabama? Would the White House be pleased with that outcome?
Look, obviously the president wants people, both in the House and the Senate, that support his agenda. But as I've said, and as the Hatch Act prohibits me from going any further, we certainly think that this is something that the people of Alabama should decide. And I'm not going to be able to weigh in anything further beyond those comments. Blake?
Thank you, Sarah. I am thankful for my wife, who is pregnant with our soon-to-be second child.
Congratulations, very exciting.
Thankful for my family, my parents.
Good luck. Number 2 only gets a lot harder.
Having a bee this week, I'm thankful that they sent me to the University of Michigan and not Ohio State. Go Blue. I'll get that out there. My question is on taxes as well. The president seemed to suggest today that Democratic help is all but gone for. Do you still think that you can get Democrats on board?
We'd certainly still like to. Frankly, I don't know why Democrats wouldn't want to support tax cuts for the middle class. As we've said many times before, seems like something they should be running to cast their vote for, and we'd certainly welcome their support if they want to get on board and help that effort. Cecilia.
Thanks, Sarah. I am thankful for the First Amendment.
Oh, yes. We're thankful for that.
Kellyanne Conway today
I
here.
think we all are.
What part of it, though?
Kellyanne Conway, I want to ask the Kellyanne Conway a different question a different way though, because she was here on the North Lawn and she said that she warned Alabama voters not to support Doug Jones, not to be fooled by Doug Jones. So is that the position of this White House, that voters are better off voting for someone accused of assaulting teenage girls than a Democrat?
Look, as I've answered, I think even for the 3rd or 4th time just today, as well as 10 or 15 times on both Thursday and Friday of last week, the position of the White House hasn't changed. We feel like the people of Alabama should make the determination on who their next senator should be.
But she made a clear
Jim.
suggestion over who they should vote for.
And I'm giving you the answer of the position of the White House. Jim.
Sarah, well, first of all, I'm grateful for my daughter and my family, and the fact that I went to the Ohio State University as opposed to Michigan.
We'll let that slide.
But my question is, does the president really regret intervening in the case of the UCLA basketball players? And what message does that send to other U.S. citizens who may be held captive by a foreign government?
Look, the president was certainly very glad and thankful to see the release of the 3 UCLA athletes by the Chinese government. And frankly, it's really fortunate that the president has built a strong enough relationship with President Xi of China that he was able to help secure the release of the American citizens. Whenever the president is able to use his office and those relationships to help American citizens held overseas, he's certainly going to do that. And again, certainly the president was happy to intervene. And I think he's made that clear by taking that action upon himself to do that without being asked, and certainly something that he's done several times in these brief, short 10 months that he's been in office, where he's secured the release of several American citizens and brought them home. Steve?
Yeah, Sarah, I'm thankful for surviving our 12 days in Asia in one piece. I'm happy to be back here. The president has not made a weekly radio broadcast for more than a month now. Have they been scrapped by this administration, and if so, why?
No, we're always looking for different ways. We received quite a few comments and a lot of feedback that the weekly address wasn't being used to its full potential, and make it where it's more beneficial and actually gets more information out. We'll keep you guys posted as those details happen. I know there certainly will be a Thanksgiving message. I'm not sure on the specifics in the date, but I'd be happy to follow up with you on that front. Jenna?
Sarah, I have a really quick Roy Moore question, and then I want to ask you about welfare reform. Has the president talked to Roy Moore since November 9th, which is the day that these accusations first came out?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of any conversations.
Yeah, and then today the president said that welfare reform is desperately needed. It needs to be reformed. What exactly is he talking about? Is he talking about food stamps? Is he talking about Medicaid? What is he talking about in that comment?
I think there's no secret. The president has spoke about this during the campaign, and something that he's mentioned briefly since taking office. And when we have specifics on what that will look like, we'll certainly announce them and roll them out. I don't anticipate that happening over the next couple of weeks. We're very focused on tax reform and making sure we get that done by the end of the year. But this is something that the president has a great deal of interest in, and I think you can count on probably the first part of next year seeing more specifics and details come out on that. Zeke?
Thanks, Sarah, for the question. You mentioned on Friday the president released an expanded list of potential selectees for the Supreme Court should a vacancy open up. Number one, if you elaborate.
You did break the rule of not offering anything.
Thank you for Can you explain to me a little bit why the president felt it was necessary to add to the list that he put out during the campaign? And then also, if you address concerns about the diversity of some of the president's judicial picks, not the Supreme Court, but more broadly across the federal judiciary, and talk about how the White House sort of values or doesn't value diversity among the federal judiciary when it comes to selecting potential nominees.
Certainly value diversity, not just in the judiciary, but across the administration, and always look for more ways to grow that, improve that. But in terms of the release on Friday, the president hadn't added any new names in nearly a year, and felt like it was a good time to do that. There's nothing more to read into it other than expanding the list should there ever be a potential vacancy for us to fill.
This administration, according to AP analysis, does lag the previous 3 administrations when it comes to the diversity of the nominees already put forward. Can you sort of address why that's the case?
I'd have to look at the specifics before I could comment on the study. Margaret?
Thank you. I'm thankful also for the First Amendment and for this exercise.
I think it's good for preparation for everybody for Thursday with your families, so that you guys will have already thought through what you're thankful for, so you'll be the most prepared. Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Can you tell us whether the president or the White House actively encouraged the Justice Department to move forward with the federal antitrust suit against AT&T Time Warner against the deal that's been announced today?
No, I'm not aware of any specific action taken by the White House.
Does he have a view on that? You're saying on the front end, no. Would you have any statement about that now?
Not at this time.
Sarah. Me. Well, first, my gratitude. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to fill in for our chief, John Roberts, and I'm grateful to only have a month left. One in the oven, so it's my first. I've got a lot to learn. My question is back to the UCLA basketball players. President Trump over the weekend, he called them ungrateful. And I'm just curious because, the players have already apologized in their briefing last week. So what more would President Trump like to see from them? What would satisfy him?
Look, I think that the president, like I said, was happy to intervene. I think it was less about the players and the father of one of the Americans really seemed to have a problem with it. Frankly, it didn't seem like the father wanted the president to intervene, which I think would have been a sad thing if he hadn't, most likely.
And
Matthew?
does he believe that he really should have left the players in jail?
No, I think if that's the case, he wouldn't have taken the action that he did, and certainly acted in order to help get those individuals released and brought back to the country. Matthew?
So, following on that, if that's not how he feels, then why did he say that he should have left them in jail? And
Look,
what
the
are
president
what are
was
we supposed to take from
look,
that?
the president it was a rhetorical response to a criticism by the father. Again, I think the president was happy to see the release of these individuals and have them back in the United States. We'll take one last question. John Gizzi.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm thankful for the position I have and the colleagues who are my friends. I'm thankful for my father, 96 years old and going strong, and to my wife, my heroine, thankful to her for saying yes on the fourth request. My question is about Zimbabwe.
Great segue, brother.
That's the best pivot I've ever seen.
Yeah. Will the administration recognize the new regime that apparently is being led by General Chiwenga in Zimbabwe, and will there be any interaction with the new government in Harare, specifically about their cutting back on the influence of China and North Korea in their country?
I don't have any announcements on our relationship with Zimbabwe at this time, but certainly we'll make sure and keep you guys posted. Again, want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and thank you for participating in this very fun exercise. We'll be around today and tomorrow. Thanks, guys.
December 19th, so a month yesterday. Really? No way. Thank you.
You know, it looks like you're carrying out